Today, I want to welcome David Buck. He is the founder of Kairos Management Solutions. And if you're a student in Greek, you know that that has something to do about time. And David's going to talk about the difference between Kairos versus Chronos. And that may sound kind of heady, but it's going to have very real meaning to you because David is about helping people make the most out of their time. And if you think about it, time is the one thing we can't buy more of. You know, we can make money, we can lose money, we can buy more of almost any resource. We can't buy more time. And David's had a unique perspective to see both during career and to coach people post-career. And he's got a message that's going to help you make better decisions during your career because he's seen what's happened as people have gotten on the other side. Sometimes they feel like they've rung the bell, and when the bell rings, it rings dull. It didn't deliver what they expected. So I'm really excited about this interview. Listen in. David, welcome.
What an honor to be here, Craig. Thank you so much for investing the time to have me on. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and first, let's talk about your book. You've got a book called The Time Optimized Life. What's that about?
What I wanted to do with the book is flip the script. So one of the tools I work with clients on is an assessment called the time management analysis. And I definitely found some key trends that occurred while I worked with clients through the hundreds that have taken it. And that actually became the outline for the book. And in essence, the principle is people are reactive in their use of time. They usually have a tendency of last in, first out. Something comes at them. They may do it well and efficiently, but what they've neglected is the other things that they should have been doing that may have been a higher priority. So therefore, they get into this cycle of constantly having to catch up and react. So the time optimized life flips that script and really helps people to think of time and their usage of time more proactively. So they define what the future looks like, knowing it's never going to be exactly that way, but it's worth the time to try to figure it out.
You know, and when you talk about reactive, when you said that, immediately about a half dozen names popped in my head. I'm not going to say too much because I don't want them or others to connect the dots, but these half dozen people, and there's more, but these are half dozen that I know who are working on important missions that are going to change the world and serve people and serve businesses. Their clients are businesses. And they're in this one industry. And the one thing I've noticed about every one of them is it's insanely hard to book a meeting with them. They have no time available.
That is the difference between being busy and productive. Now, not taking away and not saying that those people aren't productive, but they have chosen to go through their approach without offering themselves periods of breaks or respites to try to refocus, and also to proactively say, I am only going to be available at these times, or I'm going to be offering solutions. So if Craig comes a call in and Craig can't find something or we can't reach something out, that they're ready to say, here's some solutions for us to solve both that problem together.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'll give an example. You know, one of them paid for a little mini project where we're helping them with their marketing. And the first thing I noticed was it took longer to get through the mini project than it does for a lot of people. But the other thing is, once it was complete and we compiled the results, and the results are it's basically a full marketing plan, it's a full execution plan for them to grow their business. Once it was complete, it took a month to get on his calendar to show him what to do.
I've run into that all the time with clients. It's actually, I have developed what I call my patience rule, and patience as in being ready to have things take longer than anticipated. And I would probably have to say, Craig, on over half my projects, I built in additional time. So if I say this project is going to last us 3 weeks, in many cases, it's 4 to 5 weeks, because I have to try to finagle the owner of the project or the client to say, hey, listen, I need you to stop for a minute and we need to review what I've accomplished for you. So totally empathize and understand that.
Well, and it's just, it makes me sad. You know, it would be easy to be frustrated, but it makes me sad because I know this person wants to grow his business. I believe in his mission. I think he has an honorable mission. I think the world needs it. I think he legitimately changes lives in a positive way. And it makes me sad because I see this, his management of time holding him back from achieving all of the results he could potentially achieve.
I find a lot with, and I have been guilty of this myself as a business owner, is you feel you are the subject matter expert in every single element of your business. You might be, but at some point, as your business begins to scale, and as a leader, you need to begin to then download this tribal knowledge you've accumulated to others for the purposes of taking away the single point of failure, i.e., you. If something happens, there's got to be somebody else within the organization or a process in place within the organization that allows things to continue if you're not there. And I find so many leaders and entrepreneurs, they're almost afraid to do that. But when they do, it's time liberating for them.
Yeah. What do you think are the factors that keep them from delegating?
I think it's a trust issue, and trust flows both ways. One, trust in themselves that they're going to be able to share everything with the other person, to be able to make sure that they feel comfortable that whoever they delegate it to is going to get it done. I think there's also a trust factor in the other person that says, are they going to be able to do it as well as I am? Do they care enough for that? And then that ultimately ties around this idea of fear. What if something goes wrong? And so I try to push leaders and business owners to say, then start small, delegate on a small task or a variety of smaller tasks where if failure happens, it's not detrimental. It's a coaching moment and a teachable moment. And then you gradually increase that up with those individuals or individual to higher level functions and things so that you'll have a comfort level that the person or persons you're leaving this to are going to get it done if you're not available.
And you know what? I would turn that around. What if, instead of what if something goes wrong, things will go wrong. Things will go wrong.
There you go.
Plan for it. Plan for it. And when they do, turn them into teachable moments.
Absolutely. That's a key element to time management or optimization, particularly from a leader standpoint, is investing time teaching, training, and coaching others. Whereas if you can say, I can do this myself in 5 minutes versus having to spend 30 minutes teaching somebody else, the challenge is that 5 minutes could be multiple times during the day. So investing one block of time might save you incremental time for months ahead that frees you up to get out of the tactics and into the innovation and strategy, which is probably why you're a leader or an owner of your business in the first place.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we're talking to leaders, we're talking to people who want to be better leaders. And I truly believe it's hard for you to make a great impact when you're the doer. If you're going to make a great impact, it's because of what you empower others to do.
The doing part is your education and your journey. That's where you gain the experience. But at some point, and it's part of my frustration with politicians today of all stripes. I'm not going to get political one way or the other, but if you look at our politicians today, they stay in office forever. Sometimes it's a lifetime deal. And I get frustrated because I'm like, step away and train the next generation to do what you do. Use that. That's honorable. And that's the same thing with leaders to say, step back from the day-to-day operation and download this experience that you've done as a doer to others so they can be more efficient, and you're setting up the next generation of leaders yourself. I think that's such a great testament to someone's ability is to say, I have all these people around the world or around my community who are there because they relied on my advice and my expertise to help them.
Yeah. Well, and you know a little bit about my story. I was in a coma 3 years ago, and my team ran the business without me. Guess what? To get them to that point, there had to be some delegation. There had to be some things that went wrong when I delegated.
And that's a critical part of the delegation is the okay that you brought about, the okay that things were going to go wrong for this amazing period that they were ready to fill in your leadership gap when it was needed. And
Yeah.
what a blessing for you.
Oh, they were amazing. They were amazing. Well, let's talk about you brought up the concept of Kairos versus Chronos. And so Chronos, when we think about, and I don't know if I'm going to say it right, chronographer, basically a watch,
Mhm.
is where that word comes from. What's the difference between what's Kairos and what's Chronos? What's the difference between the two?
Well, you hit on a really good analogy with Chronos and the idea of a time. It is simply the consumption of time. It's quantitative time. So 30 minutes, if I'm just say I just spent 30 minutes, that's Chronos time. Now, Kairos is the perception or the quality and quantitative value you get out of time. So I use a movie, for example. You're in a movie theater and you're enjoying the movie. I love it. Time has a tendency to go by quickly. All of a sudden, you're like, hey, 2 hours later, the movie's done. You go with somebody else who hated the movie. And when you get out of there, you're going, wow, time went by. I really enjoyed myself. And the other person's saying, that was the longest 2 hours I've ever spent of my entire life. What a horrible movie. You both experienced Chronos time in that you spent 2 hours, but you had a very different view of the Kairos or qualitative time of it because one enjoyed the experience and the other didn't.
Yeah. So you're recommending, if I understand correctly, that people pursue more Kairos, that they pursue these element, that they focus on the quality of the time.
They get better at the Chronos time. So basically, they're more efficient in the use of that designated time so that at the end, they get more quality time or Kairos time. They were able to accomplish as much or more than they anticipated in that block of time because they're using it more effectively.
And so let's get back to this. You mentioned this a couple minutes ago, was they're constantly busy, but they're not necessarily productive. And I know I feel that at times. And, occasionally I'm smart enough to get up and go out for a walk in the Texas heat, which I do. I'll go out, it's be 100, 105 degrees out, and I'll go for a 20-minute walk. But what I find is it clears my mind. And when I come back, I'm more productive.
I love that you mentioned break. It sounds counterintuitive, but I really encourage clients, anyone, personal care is an often overlooked element of how you use your time effectively. And one of the elements I work with clients on is taking formal breaks during the day. The other three are to sleep consistently, at least try to get 7 hours a night. If not, work towards that. The other is some element of exercise, getting out, trying to get the heart rate up, at least to start out with. And then for me, an important element is my Christian faith, but I also weave in the general aspect of spirituality, somewhere where you're focusing your time on something necessarily greater than yourself. And those four elements to me make up a good personal care regimen to time management. And you mentioned your breaks, getting away from what you're doing in a different environment resets your brain so you can be more focused when you get back at it.
Yeah. So one of the things you brought up this is a little bit disjoint, but I think it probably ties in to what you're talking about is smartphones. You're are you a fan of smartphones, not a fan of smartphones?
I have a love-hate relationship with smartphones. I think on the positive side, if you were to be able to travel back in time 20, 25 years and put this device in the hand of your past self, it would be like science fiction. It has opened us up to so many opportunities to be more productive, to do more things in our lives. But on the flip side, it is designed to distract us. It wants you to consume time on it, whether it be texting, whether it be the communication element, whether it be the apps that you have downloaded onto that device for the sole purpose of getting you to spend Chronos time, to consume time on them. And it has the cause of why I work with clients. Their number one challenge is distractions, and the number one focus of that distraction challenges is their phone.
So what does that look like? How do I know if I'm one of these distracted people that you're talking about?
Typically, people have the feeling of guilt creeps up in their day. Like, I could have done more than what I should have. And so if you sense this kind of like guilt, or why did I just spend time on this, then you are probably being impacted by the distractions of the cell phone. So there's two routes you can go with that. The first one is that you can say, I am only going to spend X amount of time on the phone. I'm going to schedule that. And I'm going to say, I'm only going to check my phone or social media or whatever that involves twice a day. And I'm going to formally schedule time around that. The flip side is that you be more diligent and say, I'm going to set a timer on my phone so that when I do choose to consume time, whatever way, I'm going to warn myself when it's time to stop. But either way, you have got to set some guardrails for yourself. And again, start small incrementally and work it way up to the optimal thing, but start somewhere and put some discipline around it.
Yeah. And I think most people realize this, and you mentioned it, is the apps on our phones are designed to be addictive. And I forgot the name of the book. There's a book I read several years ago and talked about a 4-step cycle for creating addiction. And one of the steps was just creating an alert that says, "Hey, I need attention." And so that's built into the apps, and it's, Facebook has used this, all the main platforms use it. I think probably one of the clearest examples was years ago. There was Farmville, which I think was some application that was on Facebook where people would make farms and they had to go back in, because one of the elements of addiction is a variable reward. That's why gambling is addictive. It's not a predictable reward. If you had a predictable reward, it wouldn't be addictive. But they had this game, Farmville, that was designed, and it was perfectly designed around this cycle to create addiction. And I think we need to realize that many of the apps on our phones are intentionally designed to get us addicted and distract us from those things. So it's not necessarily a you issue. There's a force that's intent on distracting you and using advanced psychology to get you addicted to that distraction.
Yeah, there are a lot of people with a lot more letters after their name than I do and have, and that's their job. And so you just have to say to yourself, what's my priorities? And that's usually people who consume. And some of the latest studies that I was looking at a few weeks ago, the average person is 2.5 hours consuming some form or forms of social media a day via their phone or tablet or whatever. And I try to tell people, imagine if you freed up just 30 hours of that, or 30 minutes of that, sorry, and just applied something different and more focused in your life. That's a game changer. And that's where I say, put the discipline on there that says, I'm going to go from 2.5 hours over a 90-day period to I'm going to go down to 30 minutes a day or 45 minutes a day, or I'm going to do it during low function time frames. In the evening, if I'm watching TV, okay, great. I'll go ahead and go on social media, but don't do it during times when you need to be productive.
Yeah. One of the things I keep trying to do, and I fail at it, is I'm trying to get to the point where my email client, I use Outlook, where it's only open, during a few time slots during the day because email comes in. Even if I don't check it, I see the alert and it
Mhm.
distracts me and it
That is
steals
a
some thoughts. It distracts my thoughts start going down the path of what's in that email.
We go through that, and notifications are another thing that do distract us. And so, like you, for example, during this event right now, I have nothing open on my computer. My phone is quarantined away from me for the purposes of, because distractions are my number one challenge myself. So I have to close out notifications if I'm doing what I consider more dedicated and focused work. I have to minimize the distractions around me because, yeah, we're naturally gravitating to the fact is I'm needed. Someone has notified me. I need it, instead of saying it can wait.
What's your thought on multitasking?
I am not a fan of multitasking. Again, using the analogy that a lot of other smarter people with letters after their name, really comes down to the fact that our brains are wired to do one thing well at a time. Now, we can teach our brain. So I like to use the example of musicians who can play, say, an instrument and sing at the same time. You might say they're multitasking. They've actually trained their brain over hours and hours and hours of practice time to be able to do that. So it becomes what is a complex high task function for them to a lower level task function. It's like us daydreaming and driving. We're still driving. We're able to daydream. Why? Because we spent hours behind the wheel doing this. So I tell people, instead of multitasking, think microtasking. If you want to have more than one thing open that you're going to quote work on, fine. Acknowledge though, when you choose to focus on one thing, give it your all for however long of a period of time. And then when you switch to the next one, recognize I'm giving this one my all for however long. So if you're going to switch back, you're microtasking, not multitasking.
I'll tell you, the most productive person I've ever known. I worked for a guy named Joe Greb, and somebody said, he's not a multitasker. He's a serial executor. And I remember watching that. We had a staff meeting, and he'd been asking somebody on the team for a new product introduction process. We had this meeting, and he said, "What's the status of it?" And the guy kind of fumbled over his words. He's like, "All right, let's meet back together in 2 hours." And then Joe disappeared and he closed his office door. And I'm not kidding. 2 hours later, he came out with one of the most pristine and perfect new product introduction things. And he had just done that, but he would take whatever landed in his focus, he knocked out. He's probably the most focused person I've ever known. But he got a lot done because he focused on one thing at a time.
And that's something leaders need to translate to their teams. I also coach leaders as I work with them on time to be the respecters of their team's times, because in a team, your subordinates have key critical factors that you need them to get done. What a great example for him to say, I'm stepping away to be focused for a period of time. The same thing needs to apply to your team members. You need to be able to say, I'm going to honor this time, particularly if they're needed to be focused, and tell them that, to say, if you need this extra focus time, let me know. Let's work that in there, because those periods can produce a focused 2 hour time frame can replace hours and hours of group meetings together where everyone's trying to figure things out. So I'm a big fan of that. I love that example.
Yeah. There's so much, there's so much to discuss here. I wish we had hours. But one thing I wanted to make sure we covered was you work with leaders, they go all the way through their career, they hit all their goals, they retire, and they have all these hopes and dreams for retirement of what's going to be like. What do you see when you encounter these people post-retirement?
Many times for those who are really, really passionate about their careers and love their careers, you have to consider this. Let's just say you're a leader who's working 48 hours a week. And I know many of you are like, I work more than that, but let's stick with 48. And you're fortunate enough to sleep 7 hours a night. That's 40% of your awake time, the time your eyelids are open, is dedicated to a structured existence in that time frame. Let's say you all of a sudden say, I'm riding off into the sunset. I am not working after retirement. You wake up the following day, you now have to fill 40% of your awake time. So many people struggle with that because they derive so much purpose and satisfaction from their work. And so I really challenge people: define your purpose more broadly than your work now, regardless of your age, so that can become your North Star to help guide you on what life would be like if you choose not to have a career.
Hmm. And for the people that you coach post retirement, or in retirement, if you could speak on their behalf and they could go talk to their younger self during their career, what would they tell their younger self?
And that's a great question. And actually, I use that question. If you don't want to do your younger self, then look at your children as an example, because they're probably living more of a flexible lifestyle than you are. And that's what I would have as a leader, tell your younger self, how do I find more flexibility in life? How do I be able to have the joy and the satisfaction I get from my career while still thinking about all the amazing personal pursuits that I could choose to go after and experience? And then what do I need to do to infuse this flexibility in my life so that as I get older and it becomes more flexible, I have the queue filled with amazing personal experiences, both short and long term, that I want to pursue should I choose to replace the professional side of my life.
That's excellent. So you have your book, The Time Optimized Life. For those that are debating, reading it, buying that book and reading it, what are going to be their biggest takeaways when they read that book?
I think that I use an acronym throughout the book called Preparation, Execution, and Control. It's PEC, and it's the principle behind it. It's based upon lean manufacturing. So anyone who's familiar with that, lean manufacturing is about continuous improvement, sometimes down to the granular level, with the purpose of seeking perfection, knowing you're never going to attain it, but the effort yields tangible results. That's the same principle around the book. Is it lets you develop your own customized approach. I'm not going to tell you do these 5 things and life is going to magically change, but I am going to tell you, if you adopt the preparation, execution, and control elements in it, you'll put yourself on a pathway to incremental improvement in your time that will have real impact in your life.
This sounds a lot like some of Deming's principles applied to time management.
In essence, somewhat, yes. Because I used to work for a company that had lean principles in all it was done. And the ownership group was like, I know you're in sales, but you have to understand these principles, because you need to be able to tell that to the client. That's how we do things, as an advantage. And it stuck with me.
Wow. Well, David, this has just been absolutely amazing. And I think your message is powerful because it's rare for me to find somebody who doesn't feel at least a little bit of unease about how they're using their time. And so thank you for delivering this. Where can people get your book, and where can they contact you?
I think the easiest thing to do, first of all, thank you, Craig, for taking and investing your time into the listeners, theirs as well. It's been an honor. So infinitylifestyledesign.com, again, infinitylifestyledesign.com. You can go a couple routes. On the front page, you can click into and download chapter 1 of the book. So if you're kind of like, I need to learn a little bit more about what this is about, that'll help you understand that. And the book's available wherever fine books are sold online. And then the second element, if you want to get an idea of where you stand, just scroll further down on the page and you can take either one of each of the assessments or both, the time management analysis or the retirement time analysis, and get a free summary report that kind of gives you an idea of where your strengths and opportunities might lie for your own journey.
Excellent. David Buck, author of The Time Optimized Life. Thank you very much.
An honor. Thank you.